Melanie, thank you for joining us. How did this movement to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day gain traction?
Around 2013, 2014, it was a student movement, actually. It was established at UNM. And so UNM Kiva Club, which is the Native student organization on campus, really spearheaded trying to get the seal of the university changed. Of course, there were conversations around Indigenous Peoples Day happening nationally. And so it seemed like the right time for students, particularly Native students at UNM, to try to start to change sort of the symbolic racism that Native people experience, whether it's through a seal or whether it's through the name of holidays like Columbus Day. And so it was the efforts that really originated in 2014 to change the racist seal at UNM that was the seed that grew into trying to get Indigenous Peoples Day established in Albuquerque. There were a lot of other things going on locally in Albuquerque. The Red Nation, which is the grassroots Native organization that I organized with, was established in late 2014. And so there were a lot of different things brewing at that time. And so Kiva Club and the Red Nation started to work together on the seal issue within the university. That was a very successful campaign. They changed the seal a couple of years ago, but it was kind of out of that we were like, hey, we could actually do this at the city level too. And then we started organizing on that in late 2014, early 2015.
And now it's a state holiday.
It is. So I'm a historian of social movements, particularly Native social movements, as well as somebody who participates in these movements. And I think it's important for folks to understand that history comes from the bottom up in these ways. And so I think that the New Mexico's decision to make IPD at the state level is something that should be applauded. But I think it's important for folks to remember that it actually started with students and it started with grassroots Native people doing the work.
How is this change possible? Because these issues have been around for a long time.
I mean, what has been going on in North America over the last 5 to 7 years, I think starting with Idle No More in Canada, and the occupation at Apache Stronghold out of San Carlos in 2015, and then of course with Standing Rock in 2016 and 2017, the occupation of Mauna Kea in 2015, that there was something brewing with Native movements. There was a new, I think, iteration, a new kind of movement that was coming into existence in the last 5 to 7 years. And so issues about Indigenous liberation, about decolonization, were gaining new traction at a national and an international level. And so I think Indigenous Peoples Day was part of that really beautiful kind of upswing of Indigenous resistance.
How do you get people to change their minds, to listen and understand?
The way we did that is we organized with the Albuquerque City Council in 2015. We held several press conferences where we invited media, had multi-generational speakers. Ray Garduño, who was at that time a city council member, really championed the resolution through the Albuquerque City Council. And what we did was we just tried to utilize media in the best way possible. And for us, what's really important is that Indigenous Peoples Day, it's not the be-all and end-all, right? The struggle continues, but we treated it as a vehicle for elevating a lot of other struggles that were gonna take a much longer time to change. For example, MMIW, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, which has also gained national recognition now on the national platform, and resource extraction, which is a huge issue for Native people in this state. And so really treating IPD as a vehicle for elevating people who are doing work on these much more difficult, I think politically difficult sometimes, issues, and also celebrating the victory of Indigenous Peoples Day, because that was a really big victory. Getting 1,000 Native people out on the streets to march for the first Indigenous Peoples Day in Albuquerque in 2015 had not happened in 40 years in Albuquerque. And we had old Aimsters, like people from the Red Power era, emailing us.
The American Indian Movement.
The American Indian Movement, sorry. Emailing us and being like, wow, we haven't seen this kind of groundswell of resistance in this region for a really long time. And they were crying. I mean, it's reminding ourselves that victories are really important. They help to boost the morale. And I think that the feeling that people have from that is what helps carry that message forward.
I want to say thank you to the Red Nation and the Albuquerque City Council members who have pushed through to abolish Columbus Day and replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day. Oh yeah! For far too long, our colonizers have ran
system structures our lives. And what that means is that this system is premised on the erasure and death of Native people. Period. That is not a debate.
Bring into question the validity, the legality of the doctrine of discovery.
Columbus set a course for the rape of our mother, the earth. The rape of our land and women are one of the same. Columbus was the first European male on this continent with the backing of state and religious authority to ignore and even encourage the murder and kidnapping of indigenous women, a terribly prolonged legacy that exists to this day as over 3,000 missing and murdered indigenous women cases remain unsolved. Today we continue to celebrate our collective strength and resilience to remain where our creators and holy ones have placed us. The mountains still know our names. All of our relatives above and below the surface still hear our songs and ceremonies. And we are the prayers of our ancestors. Yeah.
Columbus not only heralded the death and violence that we face in this continent, but he also heralded the system of capitalism. The system of capitalism whose economic engine is oiled by the blood of indigenous people. Yeah. So we're not here today to ask for a seat at the table of capitalism. No. We are here to destroy the table of capitalism.
We are here, we are proud, we're gonna sing.
What does it mean to continue along the path of achieving justice and respect?
We're really just asking for the same things that Indigenous people have been asking for generations, and that these asks or these demands are what our traditions, right, thinking about the history of resistance, is really about. It's what it's formulated around. And so as we look into the future, we're going to continue to make the same demands just for basic human rights, for dignity, and just for respect as Indigenous people, because we often don't get it. And Indigenous Peoples Day is a moment to celebrate our dignity and our life. And I think it gives people a hope that there is a future that doesn't have so much violence, a future that is decolonized, that is actually possible.
What does it feel like for you to be part of this new generation and seeing these victories?
I'm 37. I was born in the early 1980s. I have not lived a life that was where I saw Native people rising up in mass. I think the way people maybe who had lived through the 60s and the 70s got to see. But there was no example, like a concrete example for me to kind of embody as I was moving forward. And so for my generation to see Standing Rock, to see this cluster of movements with Mauna Kea and Oak Flat, that felt like it was our moment, the moment for my generation. I guess I would be a millennial. I guess I count as a millennial. That was something real that we could grasp onto. And it means everything. I mean, we've been told by elders who've been doing this work for 40, 50 years that they're actually really proud to see our generation of people rising up, and they trust that the future will be brighter because there is a generation of younger Native people who've taken up this long tradition of resistance.
What's next? What needs to be done?
We're going to do a national rollout of the Red Deal. It's something that we've written in response to the Green New Deal. In conversation with, it's not really a challenge, but the Red Deal is something that's actually prioritizing Indigenous decolonization and liberation. It's very critical of capitalism, militarization. So we believe that, of course, the symbolic change that's represented by Indigenous Peoples Day is one step towards sort of larger goals. And the Red Deal is basically a national platform for having a very large political conversation that centers Indigenous people and doesn't marginalize us, because I think we're often marginalized in the national political sphere. So that's something that we're doing. And so IPD, there's a direct lineage, I think, between IPD 4 years ago and where we're at now with what we're organizing around. We continue to do work on gender and sexual violence against Native women, continuing to do a lot of work on trying to get moratorium on fracking in northwestern New Mexico. So there are a lot of different things that the Red Nation is doing, material change that's attached to the symbolic change, like IPD.
What continues to motivate you personally to keep doing this work?
It's my love for my people. It's my love for the land and the water. Right, we have a very short clock. Climate scientists have told us in the earlier part of 2019 that we have a very short clock to address the harm that we've caused through fossil fuel industry and carbon emissions to the world. And so as Indigenous people, we understand the earth, the water, the plants, and humans as our relatives. And so I was taught that to be a good relative means you caretake. It means you engage in reciprocity, you live in harmony with your relatives. And so for me, it's really simple. I just am living who I am as a Dene woman, as an Indigenous woman, and just trying to be a steward of the future. And in the Red Nation, that's really how we see ourselves. We don't really belong to the present, we belong to the future. This is the discourse of future generations that I think maybe you hear sometimes from Native activists. So it's deeply personal, but it's also just an obligation, I feel, not just to my own people, but to the world, because pretty much all life depends on our ability to address these things effectively, really quickly. So, yeah.
Melanie, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.